Hi and welcome to Module 3-C. In this module, we are going to talk about the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, or the Republic Act number 9003. Alright, in this module, we are going to define important terms and concepts used in the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. We are also going to outline the framework through which this law operates. And lastly, we are going to distinguish between an open dump and sanitary landfills and the consequences of the differences between uh, these two concepts. All right. So let's go first with the important definitions under the law. The primary term that I want to define, of course, is the term solid waste. All right. Solid waste, as defined under the law, uh, it refers to all discarded household, commercial, non-hazardous institutional and industrial waste, no? Street sweepings, construction debris, agricultural waste, and other non-hazardous, non-toxic solid waste. So what we want to highlight insofar as the definition of solid waste is concerned is the term discarded, such that when materials coming from these sources, coming from household, commercial establishments, institutions, industrial activities, construction, agricultural activities, when these materials, these items are discarded, they are considered already as waste. All right. Note, however, that while this definition uses uh, a broad scheme to uh, describe solid waste. All right, there is a qualification that a solid waste, insofar as this law is concerned, must be non-hazardous and non-toxic. Why is that? Because while solid waste is defined in general terms, the law makes specific exclusions to the term solid waste. Okay? Although by layman's term they may be considered as solid and they are already discarded, hence they are already considered as waste. These kinds of wastes are not considered as solid waste insofar as this law is concerned. But that does not mean that they are not under regulation by some law. All right, they are excluded from the framework of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act because these kinds of wastes are require special handling, require a separate framework, require a special framework in order for them to be disposed of properly, in order for them to not cause damage to the environment, to public health, etc., etc. And so, number one exclusion from the term solid waste are wastes which are identified or listed as hazardous. Okay? And so, even when a waste is solid, but when it's identified or listed as uh, hazardous waste, then it's not considered a solid waste within the meaning of this law. And so, it must be governed by some other law, which provides for a more specialized framework to handle such kinds of wastes. Okay? So, hazardous wastes not considered as within the meaning of solid waste in this law. All right? Also, although these are considered as hazardous waste as well, but more specifically, infectious wastes from hospitals, all right, which may carry viruses, which may carry pathogens, all right, which may be communicable, which may cause communicable diseases, and therefore should be isolated, should have a more special handling than ordinary solid wastes. And so, for purposes of this law, they are not infectious wastes from hospitals, not considered as solid waste under this law. Again, it does not mean that they are not under some kind of regulations. This just means that these kinds of wastes are subject to a more specialized body or framework of law. No? Okay. That's second. So the first would be hazardous waste. The second would be infectious wastes from hospitals. And the third, exclusion from the term solid waste, are wastes from mining activities, including those wastes which are contaminated by chemicals, those soil and debris which are contaminated by chemicals, by hazardous chemicals. And so, again, the intent here is not to make these kinds of wastes outside the operation of regulation of law. All right. The intent here is just to subject these kinds of wastes, although solid, although they may be solid in some ways, they need or they require special handling and therefore special framework, and therefore these kinds of wastes are subject to regulations from some other laws. All right, but they are not subject to the provisions, to the framework of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. Okay, now, knowing the scope of the term solid waste, all right, and knowing the exclusions to the term solid waste, now we know that this law this law is intended to address the problem of solid waste, to address the challenges of solid waste. Now, the next question then would be, how does this law seek to deal with solid waste? How does this law address the solid waste problem? All right. Now, the framework of this law, and so far as this is concerned, is fourfold. All right. Fourfold because there are 4 items for discussion here, whereby the law first identifies the sources, all right, and then the law appoints the implementing agencies, all right, and then the law identifies the values, the principles by which it operates, and from that imposes regulations. All right, let's go first to the sources. Now, who are the sources of solid wastes? Okay, first thing that comes to mind would be individuals, each and every one of us. So long as we consume something and after consumption we discard a part of that, a part of the thing that we consume, right? We are sources of solid waste. You buy a snack, for example, right? It's in a plastic bag. You eat the contents. Of course, you don't eat the plastic bag. You discard the plastic bag. That becomes solid waste. All right. You buy bottled water. You drink the water inside it. You discard the bottle. That is solid waste. All right. So each and every one of us is a source of solid waste. Okay. And so as individuals, we are considered as sources, and therefore we are considered as subjects of regulation. All right, and not just regulation. Perhaps the thing that must be emphasized here is responsibility. Okay, you consume something, you have the responsibility to dispose of properly of the discarded material from that consumption, from that act of consumption. You have responsibility to dispose whatever solid waste you generate from that consumption, from that activity. And so, for individuals, tracing responsibility, insofar as the law is concerned, it's pretty easy. You know who you know who through this, and so when that person is caught, violating the law, then responsibility is easy. I mean, the tracing of responsibility is easy. However, individuals are not the only sources identified under the law. Okay? Because establishments are also considered as sources of solid waste. Okay? Yes, individuals are there in the establishments, but when individuals congregate and let's say consume uh, consume products in that establishment, and they create waste, it's the establishment which is the repository of the solid waste. And so now uh, there's this difficulty in tracing responsibility, no, for the individual, especially when the establishment does not uh, control who comes in and who comes out, who consumes something here, and who, diba? And who generates waste here. And so, in order to address that kind of difficulty in tracing responsibility, the law here provides that in terms of establishments, all right, responsibility for compliance in this law, in this Solid Waste Management Act, shall rest with the owner and or the operator. Why is it and or? Okay, because by default it should be the owner and operator. Okay, but if it is specifically designated that the operator is considered to have primary responsibility for compliance, then it's the operator, all right, which has the primary responsibility for that, and which has the liability when there are violations of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. However, this special designation does not relieve the owner of the duty to take all reasonable steps to assure that there's compliance in his or her establishments. All right? Now, again, by default, it should be the owner and the operator. However, it can be that the operator will be specifically designated to have the primary responsibility for compliance. Okay? But that specific designation will not relieve the owner of the duty to take all the reasonable steps to assure that there's compliance with these standards. All right, such as providing with adequate infrastructure, adequate facilities for the operator to be able to comply with the provisions of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. All right. Of course, this law states that when the title to a disposal is transferred to another person, the new owner shall be notified by the previous owner of the existence of these standards and of the conditions assigned to assure compliance. It's just a matter of due diligence on the part of the new owner now, okay, to know, of course, but it's also a responsibility of the transferor to the new owner such that the new owner should be notified of the existence of these standards. Okay, when there's transfer of ownership over a specific establishment. All right, so these are the sources. Next, the next step for the law in trying to regulate, trying to address the solid waste management problem is by identifying the implementing agencies. All right. Now, what are the agencies involved in the Solid Waste Management Act? Right. We have on the national level, we have the National Solid Waste Management Commission, which is composed of government officials in ex officio capacity from several branches and departments of the government. All right, but it's also there's also a private sector representation here, no? Because not only government officials, there are private sector representatives who form part of the National Solid Waste Management Commission. Now, what are the functions of this National Solid Waste Management Commission? First, the National Solid Waste Management Commission forms policies insofar as the solid waste management framework is concerned. No, it enjoys policy formulation powers. It also has the power to approve solid waste management plans. All right, that are given by specific implementing agencies, as we shall discuss later on. And it has review, monitoring, and of course implementation powers granted under the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. Okay, so it has policy formulation powers, it has approval powers of the waste management plan, and it also has monitoring, it has review. In fact, it has implementation powers when it chooses to do so. All right. Now, we also have, aside from the National Solid Waste Management Office, we have the National Ecology Center. All right. Now, the National Ecology Center, it's somehow a support office or support agency, because it provides merely consulting. It provides information dissemination, it provides training, it provides networking services insofar as the implementation of the provisions of the law is concerned. All right. Now, this National Ecology Center is a support, assumes a support role that would have that would support the policy formulation, the implementation of the law. All right. Now, we have the local government units identified as implementing agencies. All right. They are considered as supreme, no? Insofar as implementation of the Solid Waste Management Act in their own territorial jurisdiction. All right. They are there in the field, they are at the grassroots, they know the condition of their constituencies, they know the condition of solid waste management in their territorial jurisdiction, and so it just makes sense for the law to delegate this implementation, the direct implementation of the Solid Waste Management Act to the local government units. They deal directly with the garbage and the waste generated, and ultimately they are the ones responsible for the cleanliness and sanitation in their territorial jurisdiction, in their respective territorial jurisdictions. And so they're considered as implementing agencies, okay, insofar as, and if not supreme implementing agencies, so far as their territorial jurisdiction is concerned. All right. Uh, the LGUs also, aside from implementing the provisions of the Solid Waste Management Act, they also create their own local solid waste management board. Okay, and these local solid waste management boards, they provide for the policy formulation, the plan creation, and the necessary logistical operation and operational support to the LGU concerned. Note, it creates the solid waste management plan subject to the approval of the National Solid Waste Management Office. All right, and we have here the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. While the LGUs are considered as supreme in their own territorial jurisdictions insofar as the solid waste management uh, is concerned, solid waste management efforts are concerned, at a national level, it's the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or the DNR, which is considered as the chief enforcer of this law, as it is the chief enforcer of all environmental laws. All right. Uh, but of course, the DNR and the local government units have this kind of dynamics when it comes to the the interplay of their powers and interplay of their roles so far as the Solid Waste Management Act is concerned. All right. Now, just one example for the DNR's powers under the Solid Waste Management Act. Okay. Under this law, the DNR is vested with visitorial powers. Now, I know visitorial powers. That term rings a bell. Perhaps in your other subjects, you have heard about this kind of term, visitorial power. But insofar as visitorial powers are concerned under this law, it entails the right to enter the premises of any generator of waste, of any recycler of waste, or any manufacturer of waste, and any such facilities that are considered to be sources of solid wastes. All right? It means that by virtue of the department's visitorial powers, the secretary or the duly authorized representative of the secretary, no, or of the department, okay, will have the right to enter the premises, okay, without need of any search warrant, without need of any judicial warrant. Okay? As long as it's a generator, recycler, manufacturer, or other facilities at any time, no? To question any employee and investigate as to whether there's violation of the Solid Waste Management Act is concerned, they can exercise this visitorial power, which entails the right to enter the premises. Note, however, that Section 9, while granting this broad right to enter the premises, no, the broad visitorial powers, this makes a qualification at the end. This provision makes an exclusion at the end, whereby it states that this section shall not apply to private dwelling places unless the visitorial power is otherwise judicially authorized. Note, the general rule here is that by virtue of the visitorial powers, the department has the right to enter the premises even without a warrant. However, when it's a private dwelling place, when the subject of visitorial power is a private dwelling place, then the exercise of its visitorial power must have judicial imprimatur, must have authorization from the judiciary. By virtue of a warrant, for example. Okay? And so the DNR can exercise this power, no, without warrant to all facilities that are considered as generator, recycler, or manufacturer or other facilities, so long as it is not a private dwelling place. Because when it is considered as a private dwelling place, then the visitorial power must be exercised only and unless there is judicial authorization. Without that, visitorial power under this section, under this provision of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, cannot validly be exercised. All right. Note that I said a while ago that there's a power dynamic between the national government agency and the local government units. No? And this is perfectly true insofar as Ecological Solid Waste Management Act is concerned. No? And this is illustrated perfectly in the case of Province of Rizal versus Executive Secretary, which involves a reopening of a landfill. Now, in the to cut the story short, here the court said that that action or that effort of reopening the the uh, the landfill uh, or a waste disposal site, all right, is void. No? And note that here the effort is coming from the national government. Okay, according to the court, in accordance with the local government code of the Philippines, in order for a national project, okay, that affects the environmental and ecological balance of local communities to be validly implemented, there must be two requisites that need to be satisfied. First is that there must be prior consultation with the affected local communities. And second, there must be prior approval of the project by the appropriate sanggunian. Note that absent either one of these two mandatory requirements would result into the illegality of the project, even if that project is initiated by the national government. Okay, because here the reopening of that landfill, okay, among many others, or the opening of the landfill was considered as illegal because there was no prior consultation with the local communities, and more importantly, there was no prior approval from the Sangguniang. In fact, blatant resistance from the Sanggunians concerned in this case. And so we have to bear in mind this kind of dynamics between the national government and the local government units, such that if the project of the national government agency would involve Ecological Solid Waste Management Act, and therefore we can say that it's a project that affects the environmental and ecological balance of local communities. We have first to be alerted. Now we have to see first whether there's prior consultation or prior approval of the project by the appropriate sanggunian. Because if there's absence of either or both, worse, both, no, then that national project would be considered as illegal. All right. Now, those are the implementing agencies under the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. We have already discussed the sources. Now we go to the uh, values and regulations under the law. Now, it's important that we point this out because the values are identified under the law, and the regulations are categorized insofar as values are concerned. All right, and so in the next video, we are going to talk about the values identified insofar as Solid Waste Management Act is concerned and the regulations that are attached to these values. All right, and so see you in the next video.